stand, if standing is comfortable, and join in singing our opening hymn, which is number 108. It's written wrong in your order service. 108, My Life Flows On in Endless Song. And we will be singing verses 1 and 2, only verses 1 and 2. Today, as I said, is Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year. It actually began at sunset last Friday and will continue until sunset tonight around 7 p.m. And I know there are lots of Jewish UUs, including in this congregation, who are celebrating Rosh Hashanah, but UU congregations as a whole don't typically think of this as our new year. Instead, we might have a New Year's service in early January, and we have a new church year start in August with our water communion. And of course, we can't forget our new fiscal year, which happens in July. Rosh Hashanah always falls somewhere between early September and early October and shifts around based on the lunar calendar. And it can seem a little strange, depending on your tradition, to celebrate a new year in the fall, when it gets colder and darker and the leaves fall. We prepare for winter. This is traditionally the dying of the year and not its birth. So, what do you think? If you could make the new year happen at any time in the calendar, any month, where would you put it? Think about it for a second. And then feel free to shout it out. My birthday! Spring! My birthday! November! November! Oh, no. November.
That's as a Sagittarius.
So, I heard spring, I heard summer, my birthday, I love that, a personalized new year. Because the reality is that creation is ongoing all the time. I know that here at UUCSC, we actually just had 2 new babies born a couple of weeks ago. In reality, new life, new change doesn't wait for any appropriate time of year. So I'm going to invite our choir forward. You can come up here. In a moment, they're going to provide a little music for us, a traditional Rosh Hashanah prayer, while we all do something to celebrate the new year together. Rosh Hashanah is special because it's supposed to be a reminder to use the next 10 days to get ready for Yom Kippur, when everything you've done right or wrong all year gets tallied up by God. So this new year is also a reminder to apologize and make amends, search your own heart and deal with your own resentments and unfair biases, and and to go be with your family and religious community and renew those connections. Rosh Hashanah also comes with food traditions, like throwing bread into running water so it can carry your sins away. And my favorite, eating apples with honey to wish for a sweet new year. So we actually have some apples with honey for all of us today, which our ushers are going to help pass along the aisles, same as we pass the basket for the offering, for everyone to take. And the choir is going to sing as the apples are passed. If you haven't eaten your bite of apple yet, please do so now. Savor the sweetness of the year and may the next be even sweeter. And with that, I will invite our children and their volunteer teachers to stand and make your way out and downstairs to your classrooms while our musicians will play you out with an instrumental reprise of our prayer. Sunday here at UUCUC, we make space to share the joys and sorrows closest to our hearts. We usually take a long pause with music to give folks time to write down the personal joys and sorrows they're carrying and wish to share, either on a card or in an email message to joysandsorrows@uucuc.org. Our ushers will collect any written cards, and I will read out those shared messages so we can celebrate each other's joyful news and support each other's grief. During the pause while folks are writing and music is playing, those who wish to can also come forward and take a moment at our altar table. You might drop a glass bead into the vessel of water in the center, or drop a flower petal onto the surface, letting it balance between water and air. Written joys and sorrows can be left here on the table to be read aloud. Together we'll hear our blessing song, Long Time Son, and while we listen and sing, you're invited to write the joys and sorrows you'd like to share, and to come forward to the altar table if you wish. We have a whole segment of joys this week that could just be called Pat Nolan. Here's one from Pamela Van Wyck. It was a joy to be among the many other UUs present yesterday at the 10th Annual Immigrant Welcome Awards to celebrate Pat Nolan, who received the Claire Zoke Distinguished Service Award. Claire was, and Pat is, a shining example of the good that persistent and dedicated older women can bring to the world. Thank you. A joy from Priscilla Crone. Thank you to all who donated to the diaper drive. We helped the bottom line surpass their goal. They collected 21,000 diapers and are grateful for all the community support. A joy from Beth Simpson. Hooray! My birthday is coming. All my friends cheer me on. That's a happy new year to Beth. From Adelaide Amy, a sorrow. Sorrow for a dear UU friend who is spending time with a very ill family member. From Pat McClard. Mom had a stroke Friday morning but is recovering well at home. Thank you to the doctors and nurses and cafe personnel at Gibson City and Carle hospitals. A sorrow from Wendy Graves. We had to put down our beloved 13-year-old standard poodle Riley. Her time with us was such a blessing. From Lynn Wiley and Sam Bashirs. Dr. Daniel Bashirs, Sam's papa, will go into hospice soon. He celebrated his 95th birthday last month, and his lovely wife Barbara, her 85th yesterday. Dan is not in pain, and family surrounds him. We have 3 more for Pat Nolan. We're very proud of her. And Mick McEnroe, my kittens Juniper and Stardust just turned 1 year old. They really bring me lots of joy. Thank you, Mick. Thank you to all who shared. And if I didn't read all of our glowing praise for Pat Nolan, I apologize. If I missed your message lost in an email inbox, rest assured it will be included in this week's e-news. The community will know your joy, your sorrow that you want to share. We carry on in gratitude and in hope. Hope to be reminded of what is most important. Hope that we will bring healing to that which needs most to be healed. Whatever it is we're going through in our separate lives, we are together at least for today, and for that, we are grateful. So in gratitude, in hope, in community, we pray. Our meditative music today will be sung, a sung response to the joys and sorrows that we're all carrying. You can remain seated. I invite you to join in singing, humming, or simply listening. This hymn, Comfort Me, is its own prayer with or without words. You can find it in the Teal hymnal number 1002 if you like, or simply follow the words on the screen.
Comfort me, comfort me, oh my soul. Comfort me, comfort me, oh my soul. Sing with me, sing with me, sing with me, oh my soul. Sing with me, sing with me, oh my soul.
And now I will invite forward our reader today, Jocelyn Karst. Jocelyn?
Today's reading comes from disabled queer philosopher Mitch Serruria, and includes words quoted from Indigenous philosopher Kyle White of Citizen Potawatomi Nation. Together they write, "Linear measures of time have the capacity to generate a sense of imperilment and urgency. When a stopwatch is winding down for myself to make a move, I narrow the focus of my attention and fall back on taken for granted strategies without time to question how I got them or whether they are even the best ones. In contrast, my Indigenous persons subscribe to kinship time, which, unlike linear time, isn't about productivity, efficiency, or expediency. It's not about finishing a job, getting a promotion, or filling lines on a CV. Quite the opposite. It's about forming relationships of reciprocal responsibility and respect over the course of many years, reflecting carefully on problems and coming up with solutions that take time and have no end date. Kinship time is slow and meticulous. It is an alternative to the ticking time bomb mentality.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Now we, as Unitarian Universalists, know that our circle of care should not stop at our church doors. We are deeply connected to the community we find ourselves in and to the wider world. Please continue to keep an eye on your e-news weekly newsletter for opportunities to show up, to find support, to get involved, and to be part of this community. Remember that you're all invited to a whole congregation potluck next Sunday evening at 5 p.m. We're thinking of it as a welcome back and welcome back party, a chance for all of us to celebrate the start of the church year with food and fellowship. Bring a dish to share or just bring your appetite and your smiling face. I hope to see all of you there. Also coming up is the inaugural Sage Cafe, a Friday evening open group for anyone looking for a space to skip past small talk and get into deeper topics of discussion. This Friday's group will be facilitated by UUCUC member Margaret Lovell, and the topic is justice. What is it? Does it really exist? How do we know it when we see it? If that sounds interesting to you, consider stopping by around here this Friday at 6 p.m. Finally, on October 1st at 2 p.m., CU Crop Walk will be held. This is a walk that raises funds to alleviate hunger and poverty locally and globally, and also helps with disaster relief worldwide, including Libya and Morocco, which we all see in the headlines today. We have a team of UU walkers, so please check out the information at the hub table in Fellowship Hall after church to find out how you can join. Each Sunday, in recognition of our very real interdependence and reliance on one another, we pass the plate and share our offering with an organization doing the work of justice in the world. For our September Sundays, we're sharing our plate with Brave Trails, a summer camp for trans and gender nonconforming kids, which provides invaluable support and safety to kids who need it, including to some members of our own congregation who are camp alum. You can give by text or through the online portal on our website, or if you're here in the sanctuary, the basket will be passed and checks can be made out to UUCUC. Half of what you give will go towards sustaining the work of this church. The other half will go directly to Brave Trails. We invite you to give whatever is generous for you. And know that anything you contribute, whatever the amount, is gratefully received and put to use, making a real impact for people who need it. The basket will now be passed. So we got to eat some apples and honey. We got to reflect a little on what it might mean to celebrate a new year at different points or in different seasons. And of course, the year, we know, goes in a circle. A cycle that will continue and will carry all of us along regardless of our specific New Year traditions. Different cultures and religions and different scientific fields have different ways of conceptualizing time. And as Unitarian Universalists, we don't have a single creed telling us what we must all believe, which means it's up to us to construct our own creeds. Our youth, when they go through the coming of age program, will traditionally craft their own credo statements, their I believe statements, articulating some of what they think about the world and sharing it with the congregation. But adults, too, benefit from figuring out the specifics of our own beliefs. So today, I want to create a little space for everyone here to reflect on your own understanding and experience of one specific part of our shared reality, time. In some ways, time is fundamental and underlies all we do. We can safely take it for granted. In other ways, it's a made-up concept, defined by the specific ways that we choose to count it. We can all see the sun rise and set, but there's no such thing as a second or a minute. We made that up. Or rather, after we made that up, we decided 1 second is the time that elapses during 9,192,631,770 cycles of the radiation produced by the transition between two levels of the cesium-133 atom. Which you all already knew. So let's start with the basics. Let's get out of our heads, out of the numbers, and let me ask, how do you experience time? How do you feel time in your body? We humans age, we get hungry, we get tired, we feel time passing, and we can't deny its pull no matter how we conceptualize or measure it. And time, for all that we're all moving through it in the same way, at the same pace, feels very different in different circumstances and in different life stages. How many here have felt time begin to move differently as you grow older? The way a year can be an eternity when you're 13 and pass by almost without noticing once you hit middle age. I still vividly remember begging my mom to let me go to my friend's house just 1 hour before dinner because 1 hour felt like all the time in the world to play. Now I sit down to check the news and an hour evaporates into doom scrolling before I even take a breath. Time also moves differently in times of trauma and stress. The long, slow, stretching fog of waiting to be through it, or the unsettling time skip of dissociation. I know that for many of us, pandemic time was a striking shared experience of blurred and confused timekeeping, as familiar routines dropped away and uncertainty filled those first few weeks, then months, then years. One disability scholar, Ellen Samuels, actually writes specifically about the way time moves differently for people dealing with illness or chronic pain, labeling the experience with a reclaimed slur. She calls it crip time. She writes, disability and illness have the power to extract us from linear time. Some of us contend with the impairments of old age while we are still young. Some of us are treated like children no matter how old we get. The medical language of illness tries to reimpose the linear, speaking in terms of the chronic, the progressive, and the terminal, of relapses and stages. But we know that we are never linear, and we rage silently, or not so silently, at the calm straightforwardness of those who live in the sheltered space of normative time. Our very bodies, our minds, cause us to have our own unique experiences of time, something so fundamental. cause us to have starts and stops, speeding up and slowing down without our say-so. Maybe memory loss has changed your relationship to time, stealing away the past or causing loops of repetition. Despair changes your relationship to time, making the future hard to hold on to. Even simple time blindness, so common among neurodivergent people, takes away the ability to accurately track and move through your own days the way others do. No matter how you experience time, there's a chance that you've been told or you believe, implicitly or explicitly, that the way you experience it is wrong, different from everyone else, incorrect, inconvenient to others, or otherwise invalid. So I'll remind you now that your experience of time is real. It's as real as a second or a minute, even if it's a bit less widely recognized. And your experience carries its own wisdom. What did you already believe about time when you came in here today? Do you have a symbol that you can envision when you picture how time works? The hourglass is a favorite of mine, a classic, carved into gravestones and in the marginalia of medieval manuscripts. It represents the past, the future, and the teeny tiny present, always in motion. And of course, it's infinitely turnable. So how about you? What do you picture when you picture time? How do you imagine its movement? You can close your eyes if you want, if that helps. Is time a river pushing us along? A tree with roots in the past and new growth in the future? A branching network of possibilities? Do you imagine time as a line, a path we all move along in one direction from past to future? Linear time is, I think, the closest to our Unitarian Universalist roots. The Unitarians and Universalists both grew out of liberal Protestant Christianity and tended to have a hopeful vision of humanity progressing onward and upward forever, which is a phrase that actually originated with a Unitarian minister in 1886. It was also a Unitarian who first said that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice, later famously quoted by Martin Luther King Jr. In that view, history carries us forward, slowly but surely moving us toward a more perfect world. Maybe you envision time as a wheel, like the Buddhist and Hindu samsara, the cycles of birth and rebirth, or the pagan wheel of seasons. And what about kinship time, as was brought up in our reading by indigenous thinkers? The concept of time not as a series of events or measurable milestones, but a more diffuse, ongoing, relational process with no beginning or end date. It's possible, too, that you might think about time in kind of the reverse of how our Unitarian Universalist forebears did, not a process of onward and upward toward justice and eventually an earthly paradise, but has a gradual degeneration, a falling apart. I mean, that's physics coming back in. Time as an increase in entropy, the fact that every move the universe makes emits energy, and eventually matter will run out of energy to move. In moments of despair or endless bad news, I admit that this is the model of time that seems to take hold. Linear time, but less like a gentle bending arc and more like a free fall. Grief, loss have their own powerful time-bending properties. Sometimes feeling like time is an enemy carrying us farther from a happy past. Sometimes flattening it, like it's been no time at all since the loss first occurred. I think it's significant that Albert Einstein's quote that we use to light our chalice today about the difference between past, present, and future being merely a stubborn illusion wasn't from a physics lecture or a published paper, but from a letter written just after the death of a close friend, reaching out to the family who was grieving too. His understanding of time takes the place almost of scripture in offering comfort to someone finding their way through those first disorienting weeks after a death. Is there similar comfort to be found in your own understandings of time? Reassurance that things will change, maybe? Reassurance that they won't? My goal is not actually to convince you of that one way of understanding time is accurate, is inherently better or worse than any other. Linear time has its place, cyclical time, pandemic time, kinship time, and beyond. But I do think it's worth examining what versions are dominant in the world around us and in ourselves, what versions we take for granted, what versions we might learn more about and consider incorporating into our own understandings. Because how we think about time has an effect on how we live in the world. It might feel very abstract, very conceptual, but it is real. It has an effect on how we imagine the future, what's possible in it. It has an effect on how we treat others who don't share our same framework, how we treat ourselves when we don't live up to or fit into them. If we think of everything, all history, all existence, having a beginning, middle, and end, where do we place ourselves, our current moment? It's kind of easy to feel like we're closer to the end. I mean, it's not just me. This has been the case for generations. Even Jesus in the New Testament says that the end of the world is coming within the next generation. When we think of everything as having a beginning, middle, and end, there's something about that framework that makes us think we're probably close to the end. Today, there is a literal doomsday clock maintained by a group of atomic scientists meant to warn us about how imminent nuclear apocalypse is. It is at 90 seconds to midnight, and the farthest from midnight it has ever been is 11:43 p.m. We just think we're close to the end. And climate collapse, rises in fascism, exponential inequalities, there's a lot to make us feel like we're living in end times. So I think it's worth reminding ourselves that not everyone even thinks end times are a thing. It's worth it to wonder what we would do differently if we were just living in time. The reading we heard earlier in this service about kinship time draws on the work of Indigenous philosopher Kyle White, and he was actually writing about the climate crisis when he was writing about the importance of kinship time replacing linear time in our thinking. He argues that urgent climate action doesn't have to rely on ticking clock feelings of terror in all of us. And that, for example, seizing native land to install wind farms might temporarily quiet our panic and move the climate doomsday clock back a few minutes, but it will not move us toward those actual transformative solutions which don't have an end date. If we're not living through the end of all things, if everything is part of a longer story, a cycle that might wobble but can be recovered, what would that mean to you? What would that allow us to do? It would certainly obligate us to the far future in a different way, but it would also allow us to look to the past for allies, for wisdom, for examples of how we fought back when we were in this cycle before. Because if time repeats itself, then apocalypses have been survived and will be again and again. I was just in a peace team training with 50 other community members yesterday, getting ready for Pride Fest in 2 weeks. And let me tell you what, people in that training are feeling scared about a lot of things. The LGBTQ community is being besieged right now, and it takes a lot of energy to stay hopeful about the future. But let me also tell you that we were all sitting there on that Zoom call learning strategies developed in Black civil rights protests in the 1960s, in Quaker abolition efforts in the 1860s, and in queer liberation marches in the 90s. If we're part of a repeating cycle, then we will learn from those who have lived through it before. We won't be alone in facing our version of the end times. We began today with an acknowledgement of Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, a holiday that is part of a truly ancient faith tradition. It makes me think about how we, as humans, experience time differently as we get older. And I wonder if the same is true of religions. How might time move differently within the tradition that has been around for thousands of years rather than dozens? What might our own relatively young tradition learn from the wisdom of age? For now, I propose that we learn to honor the past and greet the future with food and community in the present. And may we learn that the new year might appear whenever in the year we need it to be, whenever there are apples and honey and sweetness to be had. Whenever we need the reminder to take stock of ourselves, make amends, reconnect to the people who are going to be moving through time alongside us. Whatever shape these times take. And with that, I will invite us to please rise, if that's comfortable for your body, and join in singing hymn number 212 in the gray hymnal. We are dancing Sarah's Circle. And there are two notes. One is a lyric update, which we've sung before, where it says, sisters, brothers, all. We will instead be singing neighbors, family, all. It'll be up on the screen. And also, if you're following in the hymnal, we are skipping verse 3. Not because there's anything wrong with it, just because we forgot to include it in the slide. So please join in singing hymn number 212, We Are Dancing Sarah's Circle.
We are dancing Sarah's circle. We are dancing Sarah's circle. We are dancing.
seated. We'll close our time together by extinguishing our chalice flame, after which MR will lead us in singing our way out of the sanctuary and into Fellowship Hall with a recessional hymn. We're trying new things. You're invited to follow them out the doors when they go, but first, our shared words from UU Minister, Reverend Elizabeth Selly Jones. We extinguish this flame. Amen, and go in peace.
We'll